Carl Jung discovered that you can see someone's true character by paying attention to just two things. Not their words, not their achievements, not even their actions when people are watching. Jung found that two specific psychological reveals expose who someone really is beneath their mask. And most people give away these secrets without realizing it. Imagine this scenario: you're sitting with someone you believed you understood well, perhaps a coworker, a friend, or your romantic partner. They appear authentic, dependable, and well-adjusted, yet something doesn't quite add up. You can't pinpoint it exactly, but your gut tells you there's more lurking under the surface. Jung dedicated decades to studying what he termed the persona, the facade everyone adopts to conceal their authentic self. However, he uncovered that regardless of how meticulously someone crafts their public image, these two psychological indicators invariably surface. And once you understand what you're looking for, you'll never be deceived by an artificial persona again. These aren't intricate psychological assessments. They're straightforward observations that unveil the deepest truths about human nature. By the conclusion of this exploration, you'll not only possess the ability to interpret others like an open manuscript, but you'll grasp yourself in ways previously unimaginable. But here's what makes Jung's findings so disturbing: these two indicators don't merely reveal other people's character. They compel you to confront your own concealed nature. Jung penned, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And these two psychological windows will expose aspects of yourself you've been evading. Most individuals navigate life convinced they can assess character through superficial behaviors. They seek confidence, compassion, achievement, or magnetism. But Jung recognized that these all comprise what I term the performance layer, the meticulously crafted image we display to society. The genuine person exists beneath this performance. And Jung discovered that regardless of how proficient someone becomes at managing their image, two particular psychological patterns will invariably disclose their authentic nature. These patterns function beyond conscious command, which explains why they're so dependable. Jung wrote, "Thinking is difficult. That's why most people judge. But evaluation based on surface appearances is nearly always incorrect. Genuine character assessment demands looking deeper into the unconscious patterns that individuals cannot fabricate or control." What Jung uncovered was that character manifests itself not in what people deliberately show you, but in what they cannot help but disclose. These two psychological signatures surface whenever someone's vigilance drops, their facade slips, or they're experiencing any form of stress. Jung's initial character indicator is what I term shadow mapping, uncovering someone's genuine nature by watching who they criticize most severely. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This unconscious direction manifests most evidently in our assessments of others. When someone condemns another individual with exceptional intensity, they're not simply making an observation. They're projecting their own disowned characteristics onto that individual. Jung discovered that what we despise most in others is frequently what we've buried deepest within ourselves. He labeled this projection, the unconscious mechanism of perceiving our own rejected qualities in other people. The more powerful the emotional response, the nearer you're getting to their shadow. Let me demonstrate how this operates through a concrete example. Consider David, an accomplished architect who takes pride in his principles. At every workplace gathering, David complains about his colleague Marcus, labeling him insincere and calculating. David's tone becomes cutting when discussing Marcus's rapport with clients. His jaw clenches when Marcus receives recognition. But here's what Jung would perceive: David's intense response to Marcus isn't about Marcus whatsoever. It concerns a part of David that he's rejected. Underneath, David wishes he could be more charismatic, more socially adept. But he suppressed this aspiration because he believes it would render him insincere. Jung wrote, "We cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate. It oppresses." David's condemnation of Marcus is fundamentally self-oppression. He's rejecting an aspect of himself that could benefit him. This is why shadow mapping operates so dependably. When someone harshly evaluates others, they're invariably revealing something about their own inner struggles. The characteristics they criticize most are frequently the ones they've thrust into their unconscious. But shadow projection isn't exclusively negative. Jung uncovered that we also project positive attributes we're reluctant to acknowledge. When someone persistently elevates others, declaring them so gifted or so assured, they're often projecting capabilities they possess but don't recognize in themselves. The critical factor is to observe emotional intensity. When someone's response to another individual is excessive, whether negative or positive, you're witnessing their shadow in operation. This discloses not merely what they've rejected in themselves, but also what they secretly yearn to manifest. Jung's subsequent character indicator is what I call mask maintenance, observing how someone conducts themselves when their carefully constructed image faces a threat. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But most people spend enormous energy maintaining who they think they should be. This maintenance demands constant exertion." And Jung discovered that when someone's persona encounters a challenge, when their facade falters or their image is interrogated, their authentic character surfaces in that moment of vulnerability. Here's how to identify it: observe what transpires when someone encounters unexpected disapproval, when their capability is questioned, or when they're discovered in an error. Do they become guarded? Do they retaliate? Do they redirect responsibility? Or do they pause, contemplate, and respond genuinely? Let me demonstrate with Sarah's narrative. Sarah is a marketing executive renowned for her composed professionalism. She's established her career on being the unflappable one, the individual who never loses composure under strain. But during a crucial client session, the client critiqued her team's approach, challenging Sarah's discretion. In that instant, Sarah's persona fractured. Her tone became harsh, her bearing stiff. She interrupted the client, redirected fault to her team, and made subtle criticisms of the client's prior choices. The poised professional vanished, disclosing someone guarded, uncertain, and prepared to sacrifice her team to preserve her image. Jung would assert this instant disclosed Sarah's authentic character more than years of professional exchange. Under strain, when her carefully sustained image was threatened, her genuine patterns surfaced. Jung wrote, "The foundation of all mental illness is the unwillingness to experience legitimate suffering." Sarah's reluctance to experience the discomfort of being critiqued compelled her into defensive patterns that disclosed her character. But here's where this becomes potent for character assessment: these persona collapses don't exclusively occur during significant crises. They manifest in minor moments throughout daily exchanges. When someone's device dies and they cannot access social media. When they're delayed longer than anticipated. When someone doesn't respond to their humor. Observe micro-expressions, vocal shifts, postural changes. These minuscule moments when the facade falters disclose more about someone's character than hours of informal dialogue. Jung grasped that authentic character isn't what someone elects to display when they're prepared. It's what surfaces when they're unprepared, vulnerable, or under strain. The most integrated individuals, those Jung would designate individuated, demonstrate consistency between their persona and their authentic responses. Their public presentation and private reactions align because they've completed the work of accepting themselves entirely. Now that you grasp Jung's two character indicators, let's examine why they function so dependably from a psychological standpoint. Jung devoted his career to studying what he termed the architecture of the psyche, how the mind organizes itself to navigate reality while safeguarding the ego. Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But before transformation can materialize, we must comprehend the chemical constitution of each personality, their authentic character beneath the social performance." The reason shadow projection discloses character so precisely is because our unconscious mind cannot differentiate between self and other when confronting rejected material. When David criticizes Marcus for being insincere, his unconscious is genuinely attempting to process his own relationship with authenticity versus social performance. Jung discovered that the unconscious functions through what I term projection mapping. It projects internal struggles onto external individuals to render them visible and manageable. The intensity of someone's evaluation always corresponds to the intensity of their internal struggle with that specific trait. This is why individuals who are genuinely secure in a domain rarely harshly evaluate others for weaknesses in that identical domain. Someone who's truly confident doesn't expend energy criticizing others' insecurities. Someone who's authentically accomplished doesn't feel threatened by others' aspirations. Jung wrote, "Loneliness does not come from having no people about one, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself." When someone consistently evaluates others, they're disclosing their own inner isolation, their disconnection from rejected aspects of themselves. The subsequent indicator, persona collapse, operates because sustaining a false image demands enormous psychological energy. Jung labeled this ego maintenance, and he recognized that this system becomes vulnerable under stress. When someone's persona is threatened, their primitive defensive mechanisms activate. These defenses disclose their fundamental psychological patterns. Do they assault, suggesting underlying hostility? Do they retreat, demonstrating avoidance patterns? Do they deflect, disclosing dishonesty inclinations? Or do they integrate, exhibiting psychological maturity? Jung wrote, "A man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them." The manner someone manages criticism or challenge demonstrates whether they've integrated their difficult emotions or remain dominated by them. These patterns are so dependable because they function beneath conscious awareness. Someone can govern their words, manage their facial expressions, and carefully construct their responses when they're prepared. But when their psychological defenses are activated, authentic patterns surface. Jung comprehended that character assessment isn't about catching individuals in falsehoods or revealing their imperfections. It's about perceiving the complete person, their struggles, their defenses, their growth domains, and their authentic strengths. This comprehension enables genuine connection rather than superficial interaction. Beyond Jung's two primary indicators, there's a third pattern that surfaces when you combine them. What I designate the integration test, observing how someone manages their own shadow material when it's reflected back to them. This is the ultimate character assessment because it demonstrates whether someone is capable of development or trapped in unconscious patterns. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Here's how the integration test operates. When you notice someone projecting their shadow onto others, gently reflect it back to them, not accusatorily, but with curiosity. "I noticed you seem genuinely bothered by individuals who display themselves. Have you ever experienced wanting to display yourself but restrained yourself?" Observe what transpires. This moment discloses more about their character than months of observation because it tests their relationship with their own unconscious material. Let me demonstrate this in practice through two different responses. Remember David, who evaluates Marcus for being insincere. When asked if he ever wishes he could be more socially proficient, David might respond in one of two manners. Response 1, the defensive pattern: "Are you suggesting I'm insincere like Marcus? That's absurd. I'm authentic, unlike him. I don't need to manipulate individuals to advance." This response demonstrates David is profoundly defended against his shadow. His character is rigid, his growth potential limited by his inability to acknowledge his own complexity. Response 2, the integrative pattern: "Actually, yes, sometimes I do wish I was more skilled with people. I admire Marcus's social abilities, even though his approach bothers me. Perhaps I'm envious of something I wish I possessed." This response demonstrates David can embrace paradox, being bothered by something while also recognizing his own relationship to it. Jung wrote, "The most intense conflicts, if overcome, leave behind a sense of security and calm that is not easily disturbed." Individuals who can integrate feedback about their shadow demonstrate this quality. They become stronger through self-awareness rather than weaker. The integration test discloses three distinct character types that Jung identified. The unconscious type remains entirely unaware of their projections and becomes defensive when confronted with them. They lack self-reflection and are frequently surprised by others' reactions to them. The aware but defended type recognizes their projections intellectually but cannot integrate them emotionally. They might state, I know I evaluate people, but they cannot explore why or what it discloses about them. The integrated type can observe their projections with curiosity, learn from them, and utilize them as information about their own growth domains. Jung designated these individuals conscious, not flawless, but awakened to their own psychological patterns. This integration capacity predicts how someone will manage conflict, development, criticism, and intimacy in relationships. Individuals who cannot integrate their shadow material will repeat identical patterns indefinitely, blaming external circumstances for internal struggles. But those who can work with their projections consciously become what Jung termed individuated, authentic, self-aware, and capable of genuine connection with others. Now that you comprehend Jung's character assessment framework, let's explore how to implement it in real-world situations. But first, a crucial warning. Jung wrote, "Where love reigns, there is no will to power. And where the will to power is paramount, love is lacking." Utilize these insights to comprehend and connect, not to manipulate or dominate. Character assessment should serve compassion, not domination. Here's how to implement shadow mapping in different contexts. In romantic relationships, listen to how your partner discusses their former partners, their coworkers, or individuals they dislike. Are they consistently bothered by selfish individuals? This might disclose their own struggle with healthy self-advocacy. Do they criticize needy individuals? They might be denying their own need for connection. But utilize this information to comprehend and support them, not to attack them. If you notice your partner projecting, you might state, "It sounds like that individual's neediness genuinely bothers you." Do you ever feel like you cannot express your own needs? This creates space for deeper intimacy. In professional environments, observe how colleagues manage feedback, criticism, or challenges to their concepts. Do they become defensive, deflect responsibility, or attack the messenger? Or do they pause, consider, and respond thoughtfully? This discloses their capacity for development, collaboration, and leadership under strain. Jung wrote, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another." There is no recipe for living that suits all cases. Comprehending someone's character patterns assists you in communicating in manners that accommodate their psychological structure. For parenting, these insights are invaluable. When your adolescent complains that their friends are insincere or attention-seeking, assist them in exploring what this discloses about their own struggles with authenticity and social belonging. This builds self-awareness instead of evaluation. But remember, character assessment is a bilateral mirror. Jung wrote, "Everyone you meet knows something you don't know but need to know. Learn from them." Every evaluation you make, every response you have to someone else's conduct discloses something about your own psychological patterns. Here's a practical exercise for the upcoming week: maintain a shadow journal. When someone irritates you, document exactly what bothers you about them. Then ask yourself, where might this trait exist in me? What am I apprehensive about regarding this quality? Don't evaluate yourself for what you discover. Jung wrote, "The acceptance of oneself is the essence of the whole moral problem and the epitome of a whole outlook on life." Self-acceptance isn't self-indulgence. It's the foundation of psychological wellness. Additionally, practice the integration test on yourself. When someone provides you feedback that triggers defensiveness, pause before responding. Ask yourself, what if there's truth in this? What might I discover about myself? Jung comprehended that character development isn't about becoming flawless. It's about becoming conscious. The objective isn't to eliminate your shadow, but to work with it consciously rather than being dominated by it unconsciously. Before we proceed deeper, we must address the shadow aspect of character assessment itself. Jung wrote, "The healthy man does not torture others. Generally, it is the tortured who turn into torturers." The capacity to interpret character can become its own form of psychological torture if misapplied. I've witnessed individuals utilize Jung's insights to become what I designate shadow hunters, individuals who employ psychological knowledge to assault others' vulnerabilities rather than comprehend them. Jung warned about this danger: people will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own soul. Sometimes individuals become obsessed with analyzing others precisely to avoid examining themselves. Here are the warning indicators that you're misapplying character assessment. You feel superior when you decipher someone. This superiority complex suggests you're utilizing psychological insight to inflate your ego rather than build comprehension. You utilize your observations to manipulate others. If you're exploiting someone's shadow patterns or persona weaknesses to dominate them, you become what Jung would designate psychologically toxic. You become evaluative rather than curious. Genuine character assessment should increase your compassion, not your criticism. If you find yourself becoming more evaluative, you're projecting your own shadow. You avoid examining your own patterns. If you're constantly analyzing others but never directing the same scrutiny inward, you're utilizing psychology as a defense against self-awareness. Jung wrote, "The greatest danger is that one may get stuck in the unconscious and never come back to reality." Sometimes individuals become so fascinated by psychological analysis that they lose contact with simple human connection. The antidote to these dangers is what Jung termed ethical relationship to the unconscious. This means utilizing psychological insight to serve love, comprehension, and development, not power, domination, or superiority. Remember that everyone you encounter is fighting battles you know nothing about. Jung wrote, "In order to know the light, we must first experience the darkness." Their shadow projections and persona defenses frequently represent their attempts to cope with pain, trauma, or apprehension. Genuine character assessment should render you more humble, not more arrogant. When you perceive someone's psychological patterns clearly, you're perceiving their humanity, their struggles, their defenses, their attempts to navigate a complex world with limited resources. Jung comprehended that we're all wounded healers, all carrying shadow material, all wearing personas to safeguard our vulnerable cores. The objective isn't to expose others' facades, but to create safety for authentic connection. Utilize these insights to construct bridges, not barriers. Let character comprehension lead to compassion, not condemnation. The most profound aspect of Jung's character assessment framework is what I designate the mirror effect, the inevitable moment when you recognize that everyone you're analyzing is reflecting aspects of your own psyche back to you. Jung wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams? Who looks inside awakes." The ultimate purpose of interpreting others' character is to awaken to your own. This mirror effect functions on multiple levels. First, the individuals who trigger your strongest responses are invariably demonstrating your own shadow material. If you're consistently bothered by arrogant individuals, examine your relationship with confidence and humility. If needy individuals drain you, explore your own needs and how you express them. Second, the character traits you most admire in others frequently represent your own undeveloped potential. Jung designated this positive projection, projecting your own unlived possibilities onto others. When you elevate someone for being so creative or so confident, you might be projecting qualities you possess but haven't claimed. Third, the patterns you recognize in others become visible in yourself once you understand what to seek. If you become proficient at identifying others' persona collapses, you'll start noticing your own. If you can perceive others' shadow projections, you'll begin catching your own in real time. This mirror effect creates a feedback cycle of self-awareness. Every individual becomes an instructor. Every interaction becomes a classroom. Every evaluation becomes a doorway to self-discovery. Let me share how this manifested in my own comprehension. I once worked with someone whose constant need for validation irritated me intensely. I evaluated them as insecure and attention-seeking. But Jung's framework compelled me to examine why their conduct triggered me so powerfully. The uncomfortable truth was that I had my own relationship with validation that I wasn't acknowledging. I had developed subtle methods of seeking approval that I convinced myself were different from their obvious approaches. My evaluation was fundamentally self-rejection. I was criticizing in them what I couldn't accept in myself. Jung wrote, "We are not what happened to us. We are what we wish to become." The mirror effect demonstrates not merely what we've been, but what we're capable of becoming. Every character trait you can recognize in others exists as potential within yourself. This doesn't mean everyone will develop every trait. Jung believed in individual differences and unique psychological types. But it means that comprehending others' psychological patterns provides you a map of human possibility, including your own unexplored territories. The mirror effect also explains why certain individuals feel familiar even when you've just encountered them. Jung designated this recognition of the archetypal, perceiving universal human patterns that resonate with your own psychological structure. As you develop proficiency with Jung's character assessment framework, you begin to embody what he designated the conscious individual, someone who perceives clearly without evaluation, comprehends deeply without manipulation, and connects authentically without losing themselves. Jung wrote, "Individuality is the opposite of being a member of a group, an institution, a race, or a nation. The conscious individual thinks independently, feels authentically, and relates genuinely rather than conforming to collective patterns." This consciousness has several distinguishing characteristics. You perceive people's shadow projections with compassion rather than superiority. You comprehend that their evaluations disclose their struggles, not their moral failures. This enables you to respond to the pain beneath their projections rather than react to the projections themselves. You notice persona collapses without taking them personally. When someone becomes defensive or assaults under strain, you recognize their protective mechanisms rather than their authentic intentions. This prevents you from being drawn into unconscious drama. You can embrace paradox. Jung wrote, "The pendulum of the mind oscillates between sense and nonsense, not between right and wrong." You comprehend that individuals can be simultaneously kind and cruel, strong and vulnerable, authentic and defended. You utilize character insights to build connection rather than create distance. When you perceive someone's psychological patterns clearly, you experience more empathy for their human struggles, not less. Most importantly, you apply the identical compassionate analysis to yourself. Jung wrote, "The first half of life is devoted to forming a healthy ego. The second half is going inward and letting go of it." You perceive your own shadow projections and persona defenses as information, not indictments. This consciousness transforms how you move through the world. Conflicts become opportunities for comprehension. Difficult individuals become instructors. Your own responses become data about your internal landscape. But Jung warned that consciousness comes with a cost. Loneliness does not come from having no people about one, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself. When you perceive psychological patterns clearly, you may feel isolated from those still functioning unconsciously. This loneliness is not permanent, but it is part of the individuation process. You're transitioning from unconscious belonging to conscious connection. The old manners of relating through shared evaluations, collective personas, or mutual projections no longer satisfy you, but deeper connections become possible. When you can perceive and accept both your own and others' psychological complexity, you can form relationships based on authentic comprehension rather than idealized projections. Jung wrote, "The creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct acting from inner necessity." Conscious relationships feel playful rather than heavy, creative rather than repetitive, alive rather than scripted. The ultimate objective of comprehending Jung's character assessment framework isn't to become a master analyzer of human nature. It's to become more fully human yourself. Jung wrote, "Man's task is to become conscious of the contents that press upward from the unconscious." As you practice observing shadow projections and persona collapses in others, you inevitably become aware of these identical patterns in yourself. This awareness creates choice. You can respond consciously rather than react unconsciously. Integration transpires gradually through small moments of catching yourself projecting, noticing your persona defenses, and choosing authentic response over automatic reaction. Jung wrote, "We don't really heal anything. We simply let it go." Releasing unconscious patterns permits your authentic character to surface. This process isn't comfortable. Jung warned, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." Perceiving your own psychological patterns clearly means confronting aspects of yourself you've avoided. But this discomfort is productive pain. It leads to development rather than stagnation. The integration process follows predictable stages. First, you become aware of patterns in others while remaining blind to your own. You can identify everyone else's projections but not your own. Second, you begin recognizing your own patterns intellectually, but still get captured in them emotionally. You might think, "I'm projecting right now," while still feeling completely justified in your evaluation. Third, you develop the capacity to catch yourself in real time and choose different responses. This creates space between trigger and reaction, enabling conscious choice. Fourth, you begin responding to others' unconscious patterns with consciousness rather than unconsciousness. Instead of becoming defensive when someone projects onto you, you can perceive their struggle and respond with appropriate boundaries and compassion. Finally, you embody what Jung designated the transcendent function, the capacity to hold opposing psychological forces in creative tension until something new surfaces. You become comfortable with paradox, uncertainty, and complexity. Jung wrote, "The difference between a good life and a bad life is how well you walk through the fire." The fire is the inevitable conflicts, projections, and persona collapses that characterize human relationships. Learning to walk through these experiences consciously transforms them from destructive forces into opportunities for development. This transformation doesn't transpire overnight and it's never complete. Consciousness is a practice, not a destination. But each moment of awareness, each choice to respond rather than react, each decision to perceive clearly rather than evaluate harshly, moves you closer to authentic selfhood. As you embody Jung's insights about character and consciousness, something remarkable transpires. Your awareness creates ripples that affect everyone around you. Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." When you cease participating in unconscious patterns, when you don't take the bait of others' projections or react defensively to persona collapses, you create space for new kinds of interaction. Individuals sense this shift even if they cannot articulate it. They might state you seem different, calmer, or more genuine. What they're sensing is your decreased reactivity to their unconscious material. You're no longer feeding their projections or reinforcing their defenses. This creates what I designate consciousness contagion. Your awareness invites others into greater awareness, not through preaching or teaching, but through embodiment. Jung wrote, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." Your authentic presence speaks louder than any words. Some individuals will resist this shift. Your refusal to participate in unconscious drama might initially frustrate those who depend on these patterns. They might escalate their projections or intensify their persona defenses, attempting to pull you back into familiar dynamics. But others will be drawn to your consciousness like flowers toward light. They'll sense the possibility of more authentic connection and begin loosening their own defensive patterns. This ripple effect extends beyond individual relationships into families, workplaces, and communities. When one individual ceases projecting their shadow and starts owning their authentic responses, it provides others permission to do the same. Jung believed that individual consciousness was the key to collective transformation. He wrote, "The world will ask you who you are, and if you don't know, the world will tell you." When you know who you are, including your shadow and your authentic character beneath your persona, you become immune to the world's projections. You also become a beacon for others seeking their own authenticity. Your willingness to confront your shadow provides others courage to confront theirs. Your capacity to drop your persona facades creates safety for others to risk authenticity. This is the deeper purpose of character assessment. Not to evaluate or manipulate others, but to comprehend human psychological patterns so clearly that you can respond to them consciously rather than react unconsciously. Jung's legacy wasn't his specific techniques or theories. It was his invitation to consciousness. Every individual who chooses awareness over unconsciousness, authenticity over performance, and comprehension over evaluation contributes to the evolution of human consciousness itself. The two things Carl Jung identified that disclose someone's genuine character, their shadow projections and their persona collapses, aren't merely tools for interpreting others. They're mirrors that reflect your own journey toward consciousness and authenticity. Jung wrote, "To be normal is the ultimate aim of the unsuccessful." But you're not here to be normal. You're here to be conscious, to perceive clearly, to comprehend deeply, and to connect authentically with the human beings around you. Every time you catch yourself harshly evaluating someone, you have an opportunity to explore your own shadow. Every time you notice someone's facade faltering under strain, you can examine your own persona defenses. Every time you resist the urge to utilize psychological insight as a weapon, you choose consciousness over unconsciousness. Jung comprehended that the journey toward authentic selfhood is the most important work any individual can accomplish, not merely for themselves, but for the collective evolution of human consciousness. Your willingness to confront your own shadow, to drop your own facades, to respond consciously rather than react unconsciously creates ripples that extend far beyond your individual life. You become what Jung designated a culture creator, someone who models new possibilities for human relationship and consciousness. The two indicators Jung discovered aren't the conclusion of character assessment. They're the beginning of character development, your own character development, and your contribution to the consciousness of everyone you encounter. So, watch for the projections. Notice the persona collapses. But most importantly, direct that identical clear perception toward yourself, because the ultimate character you're developing isn't someone else's, it's your own. Your journey toward consciousness begins with perceiving clearly, and it concludes with becoming who you genuinely are.